should be live. Hopefully this is working. If you can see and hear me, then feel free to write in the chat. I will be paying attention to make sure that everything is working the way it should be. I'm also going to do a little sound test myself to make sure I can hear myself. And it is working. There we go. Awesome. Right, well, I can hear myself, and I think I sound all right. Oh, volume is low. Okay. Is this any better? I've increased it somewhat. I do not want to... a little bit quiet. Okay. This is a bit louder. Hi, everybody. Oh my God, there's so many people here. How is this? Is this better? I was a bit afraid it was a bit peaky earlier. I can only hear in the left ear and poorly. Oh no. This is all, okay. Mic volume very quiet. Oh God. Right. I am increasing the audio capture. How is this now? This is why I started early, because I thought there might be some technical difficulties. It's weird though, because on my side it's actually quite loud. Okay, still quiet. Okay, this is no sound. Oh God, this is not good, is it? Okay, audio input capture. Let's see, what do we want properties for this? Why is this not working? Still louder. Oh God, I think this is about as loud as it gets. I can try this, but I remember it sounding pretty terrible when I tried earlier. How is this? Okay. Is this good? It's plugged onto me, and I'm afraid this might be overly loud now, but let's try. Sound is in the left ear only. That's very weird. It was working a moment ago. Okay. Just a second. Let me figure this out. Why is this suddenly not working? Better now? I know, right, Cooper? I spent an hour preparing this, sounded fine on all my test live streams, and I can't even hear myself now on the thing. Still quiet. Oh dear God. Much better volume, still only left panned. If anyone's an OBS expert, if they could let me know how to change it to mono to both, that would be awesome. Should be. Let's see. Where's the microphone? Ah, I think I spotted our... Oh dear me. Okay. Through left ear only. Right. That was probably very loud and very annoying. On only one side, right. Why is this happening? To go, studio mode. No, that's not what I want to do. Settings. What's up with the audio? Channel, stereo. Okay, is it through both sides now? I've set it to mono. Hopefully that means it's gonna work. Okay. How is this? Is this better? For what it's worth, I can also not hear myself. Oh. Mic setting, then Windows. Oh dear God, I'm really sorry about this. I promised this worked earlier. I had it going for an hour, the audio was perfect. I don't know what I've done to fluff it up at the last minute. Audio, why? Ah, what's this? How is this? Does this sound better? Classic starting Oh dearie me. Audio is good. Okay, well, that's good, I guess. It is OBS 19.03, 64-bit Windows. Right, settings again. Hello, audio. Oh, what is this? Ah, okay. Is this better now? I'm just gonna, keep clicking things until it sounds better. Just one ear. There's also a delay as well between me and the computer, so it's quite hard for me to sound. Yes, there is. I did add a lag to this to make sure it would buffer correctly, which is also annoying because it means it takes a bit longer. Okay, at least the left ear works. So why is it only on the left? How about now? Have I checked the plug? Yes, I did. I'm pretty sure I did. I'm really surprised it stopped working. Okay. Advanced. Why are you being a problem, microphone? Yes, I would love to uninstall Windows, but that's not going to help. Audio quality okay, but still only left hand. Okay, well, I don't know how to change this to mono. I also don't really understand why it's doing that because it was working fine earlier. Oh, okay. So apparently the program must be restarted for these settings to take effect. So I might have to cancel this and restart it and hope for the best. Audio quality okay, left also working. Okay, if the sound is more or less okay, what I'm gonna do, okay, I can hear myself. Okay, right, I'm going to put you back here. I think what I need to do is apparently I need to restart the program because, it would be helpful in that way. So I'm going to restart it and it should be forced to mono. So I'm doing some last minute tests. Okay. Right. Does this sound good right now? This is exactly what I did not want to happen on a live stream. It was better before. I'm sorry guys who are actually here for the science. I can't believe this happened. I seem to be able to hear myself anyway. Okay. Quieter but good quality. Settings, let me just check the audio one last time. Right. Okay, better now? Awesome. I'm sorry. Oh. Oh no, ladies and gentlemen. Okay, right, well. How about now? Is this better? We will get started soon, I promise. I shall wait for a green light and I will go ahead with this. Oh, the fuzz is back. Oh, right, okay, I get the fuzz now. Okay, just very quickly, I can fix the fuzz. I know how, oh no, do I know how to fix the fuzz? Oh, do I? I don't really know. filters, properties, castle, no, oh my god. Right, 2 more minutes. I think I know how to fix the fuzz. I am going to copy what I did. So, I've got suppression level of -30 on it, and that should hopefully make it sound pretty good. Noise suppression, okay. Hey Nate. Okay, how does this sound now? I think we're ready to go, I hope. It sounds good to me. Awesome, good, right. I will keep an eye on the comments in case something else decides to go wrong, but we're gonna get going because I am already running late. Right, hi everybody. Welcome to this very second Draw Curiosity live stream. Done the video and sound check. Just to set the scene, you are sellotaped on top of a tripod with a microphone clipped in front of me. There is a noise is still there, only left channel. Okay. I'm just gonna leave it like this, I think, because otherwise we'll never get there. Just repeating what we say in the background. Can I fix the background? Okay, well, there's a mixture of comments going both ways. I'm not really sure how to force it to one ear, though. Why does this happen? Okay, let's just try and go with this. Right, I'm going to try and not get distracted anymore. I am predominantly on the left ear. It's good. Okay, let's just go with it. I apologise for the lack of proper mono. No echo, left ear is fine. As I was saying, right, let's go with this. Right, the language of this live stream is going to be in English. I say this because sometimes I get people asking if it's going to be in Spanish or if I'm going to be translating. It would take twice as long to do it that way. And I also can't do live captions. I wish I could, that would be awesome. But there's already a lot going on around me with a presentation here, this OBS failing on me there, and some notes. If you like science, it would mean a lot if you would share this buggy video to people who enjoy it. And finally, I want you to say hello to the lovely people who've got the big spanners next to their names in the chat, because they are our moderators and they're helping me out to keep the chat kind and friendly, which I'm sure it will be anyway. And now onto the topic of the live stream. So, it is actually an honour for me to be invited by the University of Binghamton in Canada, if I said that correctly, by Maximus Thaler, who is running this series of evolution seminars, or EvoS series. And he got in contact with me about 6 months ago to ask me if I would like to give a lecture on evolution about my research. And the interesting thing is I don't actually study evolutionary biology, I study insect flight, so my talk would look a little bit like this. But I do really enjoy evolution. I studied my undergraduate at Oxford and was actually tutored by the people who do the most evolutionary biology here. So Griffin, Stuart West, and it is actually the work of Stuart West that I want to be talking about today. It was actually quite hard to decide what topic I wanted to talk about because we're talking about cooperation, which I think is one of the more interesting topics and one that's easily accessible even if you haven't done much biology. But there are also things such as sexual selection, sex ratios, signalling and communication. Quick check on the chat. Audio sounds pretty good, good. Right. The format, I'm going to do 1 hour-ish lecture. It might be a bit longer, it might be a bit shorter, but hopefully it will be just on time. I'll try and do a very quick Q&A at the end to allow everyone to catch up. and then I will be hopping over to the EvoS channel, which should be linked in the description of this video, so you can watch the live Q&A there, because I will be jumping in with the students. They will be grilling me with fun questions about evolution for me to cover. And I also hope, a little prayer for my voice. I woke up with a sore throat this morning. I don't think I've ever spoken for an hour in my entire life, all in one go, so let's hope this goes all right. And yeah, I think that, oh, and I also wanted to do very quickly, just tell you about what the previous lecture was all about. I just thought it would make a smooth introduction. I clicked the wrong button. There we go. So yeah, the first lecture was actually all about Nico Tinbergen's 4 questions. Brief terms, Nicholas Tinbergen was an animal biologist and he studied behaviour, and he's basically one of the people who created animal behaviour as a field as we know it today. He's best known for his 4 questions. 3 of them are actually from Julian Huxley, but he came up with a 4th one. They're somewhat based on Aristotle's philosophy, and it's basically a way of studying a behaviour or trait and being able to analyse it scientifically. So the 4 questions, he separated them into the proximate, which is the how, and the ultimate, which is the why, and also the object of study. Are we looking at it right now, or are we looking at the process or the sequence of how that trait became to be? So to give 2 very quick examples, you could use Tinbergen's 4 questions to, for example, describe what eyesight is. Why do animals see? You could say, for instance, the adaptive value, their actual function, is so they can detect danger, so they can find food and eat it. The mechanism, how does the eye work? Ontogeny, which is development, how the eye developed from the moment you were a fertilized egg and began to divide to what it is today, to how it developed from embryo to a full-grown adult. So, for instance, Mexican cavefish actually begin to develop their eyes, and then halfway through development they undergo apoptosis, which is cell death, and the eyes disappear because, to be honest, a cavefish lives in the dark and they don't need to see anything. And then finally, phylogeny is basically, we could summarize it as evolution, but all of them are answering evolutionary questions. But essentially, we are looking at how this trait originated in phylogenetic history. And you could also do this with behavior. So, for instance, grooming in mice is quite interesting. On the one hand, you could say the mechanism, how it comes about. There are certain hormones which are triggered by certain genes, which will make the mouse more or less likely to groom their young for a longer duration of time or shorter duration. Grooming your mice for longer keeps them more hygienic, and it also produces oxytocin, which makes the rats, the growing up mice or rats, less stressed. So that would be the adaptive value. And ontogeny, how does that develop? Phylogeny, when does this behaviour commence? So hopefully that can be a brief introduction. I hope the audio goes well. I can see what's going on in the chat. I'll try not to get too distracted by it. I'm really sorry that's the case. And all this being said, I think we're ready for it. We are ready for learning all about animal cooperation, and I'm so excited to do this. Right, well, we're live again, and welcome back. To the live stream, why do animals help each other? Why is cooperation even a thing? So, us biologists, we like to analyse everything, and amongst that we like to analyse social behaviour, which is essentially when you've got multiple animals or organisms interacting with each other, whether the behaviours they display towards one another, whether they are positive or negative to the actor and the recipient. So we have this very easy way of splitting it up. If it's beneficial for both, then it's mutually beneficial. If it's good for the actor but bad for the recipient, it's a selfish act. This is the easiest one to explain in animal biology. Everyone's always looking out for themselves. So if it hurts another organism, well, it's still good for the actor, so it's easily explained. Altruism is basically when an actor performs a behaviour that benefits the recipient, but they actually incur a cost to it, and I have made a video on this channel about that, and I will be playing that later, hopefully with perfect audio. And then spite is actually one of the hardest ones to explain, but we will be touching on it as well. So spite is essentially when an actor or a focal individual incurs a cost in order to harm another individual, sort of cutting your nose off to spite your own face. And you could say that that cooperation basically falls within these two boxes. Not all cases of mutual beneficial social behaviour would be considered cooperation, but the majority probably are. And as a pedantic biologist, I have to describe what cooperation is in this instance. So it's a form of social behaviour, it benefits another individual, and it's evolved at least partially because of this benefit. And the evolved bit is the important bit, because there are some examples of social behaviour, as you'll see in a minute, that are beneficial to two individuals, but you couldn't really describe it to be cooperation. But before we get there, there is actually a very big problem with cooperation, which is, why would you do it anyway? Because you're still incurring a degree of cost to help someone else. So how does cooperation happen, and why does it happen? I would like to start with an example with vampire bats. Vampire bats are quite remarkable creatures. They sleep during the day, and out at night they go on long flights. They go and find different mammals to suck their blood. They get a blood meal. They're incredibly good at it as well. They have excellent heat detection mechanisms, so they can easily find the prey. They are very quick at taking the blood meal, and they're also very efficient at processing it. So in about half an hour after they've taken the blood meal, they will actually urinate most of the water. So they're keeping the nutrients without carrying the weight of the water with them. However, if you're a vampire bat, you are honestly quite screwed if you don't get to eat. Especially when you're a small animal, you need as much energy as you can get. You need to be eating every day. They're warm-blooded animals as well. That expends a lot of energy. And so when that happens, they actually have this amazing thing where the bats that haven't eaten can actually beg from their friends, and they will regurgitate the blood a little bit like birds would, and they give it to their friends. So they make a small donation of a small blood meal to make sure their friend can make it through to the next day. If a bat doesn't eat for 2 days, it is guaranteed to be dead. And this is a very interesting example of cooperation, as you'll see later, because it's not as straightforward as it seems. Altruism has a cost. Again, let's go for a biological definition. An individual behaves altruistically when its behaviour benefits another individual at a cost to itself. So that would be true altruism. I know that in human relationships and interactions we might have slightly different definitions of altruism, but when I'm speaking of altruism here, it is this purely biological form. And in essence, this is a form of altruism for the bats, because they might as well keep and hang on to that blood themselves rather than potentially incur the risk of giving that blood away. And you might think that a small donation may not mean that much, but small things are cumulative. To give an example, I actually know two twins. One of them they were both identical twins, look exactly the same. One of them was quite sickly as a kid, and they're actually 2 inches shorter than their twins. So everything else is equal, but one of them is 2 inches shorter. So clearly being ill or missing out on food and energy has had some kind of impact on development. Same would apply for animals, and especially for small animals. If they don't get the food they need, then they could very well die. Sorry, I keep hitting the wrong one. And of course this means that they incur a cost to their fitness, and here comes another definition. I think this is the last definition for a while. Fitness in biology is not exercise fitness, but as it eloquently says here, a genetic contribution of an individual to the next generation's gene pool relative to the average of the population, often measured by the number of offspring or close kin that survive to reproductive age. Let's put that in English. Basically, from a Darwinian perspective, from a biologist's perspective, the smallest unit of selection is the gene, or perhaps a smaller portion of the gene, depending on whether you agree with the gene-centric view of life or not. And in essence, there's no particular goal, because genes don't really have an intention, but obviously those that are better at making the individual that carries them reproduce and pass those genes on to the next generation, then those are going to proliferate, whereas those that are bad at it aren't going to be there. So a higher fitness means that the gene has a higher chance of being passed on. Lots of factors contribute to that, from environmental, normal, everyday factors, to actually things that are inherent to the way the gene interacts within their body. And often measured by number of offspring or close kin. So number of offspring is a very direct way of seeing what proportion of genes you're passing on to the next generation. In humans and most diploid organisms, you would say that the number of offspring would probably be related by 0.5 to the parent. There are some cases where that's not exactly the case, but on average, yes. Or close kin that survive to reproductive age. We will be talking later about inclusive fitness, and that will hopefully make a little bit more sense. There are other cases of interesting cooperation. Eusociality is one of my favourite. I've made a video on eusociality. It should be linked in cards as well, so you can watch that more in depth at your own pace later. Shameless self-promo. So eusociality, basically certain individuals in a colony forego their ability to reproduce in order to help a reproductive queen reproduce more. And that's actually the ultimate form of altruism in biology. You're giving up your ability to have your own offspring in order for someone else who is likely related to you to have their offspring. True eusocial animals, ants, bees, wasps and termites, although there are also facultative eusocial animals such as naked mole rats. Meerkats are cooperative breeders. You could consider them to be eusocial. Depends very much on what your strict definition of eusociality is. So again, that's another example of cooperation that can be somewhat confusing to people who might be encountering it for the first time. And the other thing about eusociality is that, of course, it is open to cheaters and free riders. So I don't know if you've heard of the tragedy of the commons. Picture a big grazing field, a resource that's free to access by a certain community of people. Say you've got 4 or 5 farmers who have access to this land, and they can put as many cattle as they want to feed off this meadow. So you can envision that at first perhaps each one puts 5 cattle on, there are 20 cattle grazing off the meadow, then they all obtain a similar benefit from it. And then you get one farmer who's a little bit cheeky and thinks, I don't think anyone's going to notice if I put an extra cattle on there and I can feed more of my cows, and sure, all of the other cows will have 1/21st less of food than the others, but still it's not a big difference. And then you might get another farmer who thinks that, and they add 2 extra cattle. And eventually you could have a case where you've got this free resource going, but is limited eventually. And they overexploit it by adding so much cattle that eventually none of the cattle get to eat anything at all. And that would be the tragedy of the commons, because the cattle have no food and the farmers in the end have lost out. And that would be an example of unstable cooperation, because in the end it is doomed. And we also have examples of this in biology. So virulence, which is essentially how dangerous a bacteria or a microorganism infecting another host organism is, would be a good example of unstable cooperation. If a bacteria is too virulent and ends up killing the host as they multiply, then they won't be able to spread to other hosts, and ultimately the bacteria will die as well because the host they're living in has gone. You also get this in sexual selection and mating in, for instance, flies and many insects. Males may attempt to repeatedly mate with different females, but ultimately if the females are mated with too many times, that decreases their survival, and therefore they're not going to be able to lay as many offspring. So in the end, they're shooting themselves in the foot. So a quick summary, this is the big problem with cooperation. How do we explain all of this? And I think it's also important, to take into account why and how organisms cooperate, going back to the 4 questions from before, and also to think about what is the origin versus the maintenance of cooperation. So again, I don't know how many videos on this channel you've watched. I've made a couple on evolution. There was one on the how did two biological sexes evolve, which was why do we have two gametes, and that was actually about the origin but not the maintenance of that trait. And then eusociality, that was also about the origin. How do you transition from facultative, voluntary eusociality to obligate eusociality, whereby the workers can never reproduce under any circumstance. But in this case, I feel the arguments I'm going to give about cooperation are more to do with the maintenance. I think the way that cooperation originates through evolution is a little bit more restricted than what I'm going to discuss here. And I'm just pointing this out because I think there's small distinctions that are important to take into account, and what creates, well, I don't want to use the word create, the origin of a trait isn't necessarily how it is maintained. Going back, so entering the meat of the live stream, so here is a very nice graph from a paper that I set the students who are watching this to read. It's from Stuart West et al. 2007. And this is how he broke down cooperation. So this is our little roadmap. I'm not going to cover every single thing because it would take forever, and the live stream is actually already going on for a while now. It's going slower than I thought. So we'll be looking at direct benefits, indirect benefits, and then finally reciprocity, which is interesting in itself. Right, so direct fitness benefits. I think this is the easiest one to wrap your head around to explain cooperation. If the actor is directly obtaining a benefit from what they're doing, then it kind of makes sense that they would do it. And if the benefit they get is even bigger by cooperating with another organism, then it makes even more sense. And there are two main divisions. You can see it as a byproduct. So, for instance, many animals actually group together and form flocks, because basically if you're in a bigger flock and you're attacked by predators, you're trying to hunt something, you're more likely to succeed at hunting if you're in a larger pack. And if you're an individual that's likely to be predated upon, if there are 7 other tasty organisms around you, then you're a lot less likely to be plucked out of the group and eaten yourself. And meerkats do this. So meerkats that are in larger groups actually have better survival, and not only that, but some meerkats will actually forego having their own pups, and they will help the dominant reproductives rear their own pups, because that will make it more likely for the group to be larger, because they're more successful at maintaining those pups and increasing the group size. But not everything is cooperation, so not every single byproduct we could consider cooperation by evolution. So, you know, elephants like to crap, and they crap every day because they've got to get rid of their waste. And guess what? Dung beetles love crap as well. So they go and find this crap from the elephants and eat it all up. Is this cooperation? No. Would it be? How could it be cooperation? That is perhaps a good question for you to think about. I would say this could perhaps evolve to be a cooperative behaviour if an elephant were to know that there were dung beetles in the area and they crapped twice as much because they obtained more benefit from getting rid of their waste twice as fast, and the dung beetles got twice as much poo to lay their eggs in and build their homes in, then that could perhaps be cooperation. But a simple mutual beneficial relationship where an organism produces crap that a beetle can deal with, we could not consider that cooperation as a byproduct. And here are even more beetles with even more elephant crap. And then, so we talked about earlier about cheaters. So whenever there's anything good going around, there's always going to be someone who tries to take advantage of it, and those are the cheaters and the freeloaders. And in those cases, you might want to apply some kind of enforcement, because cheating can spread quite easily. Imagine a group where everyone is cooperating together, and say by cooperating you get +2 on your fitness. Perhaps you get +4 from receiving the help from someone, but you're also incurring a bit of a cost helping the others. So your net benefit is +2 over if you were solitary and doing nothing. Now imagine you get a cheat, and this cheat doesn't care about helping others, but they receive the help. So they would be getting +4 on this fitness, and that means they would be more likely to have more offspring and therefore spread that cheating gene amongst the population. So if that were to actually happen, cheaters would spread very easily and the whole cooperation system would break down. but it doesn't. And that could happen in cases of enforcement. And I'm now gonna do a little cool graphic in Paint, because that's, you know, after OBS, we're not gonna try too hard with complicated things. So I'm gonna show you an example of a public goods game. If you're an undergraduate, you might have been invited at some point to participate in these kinds of things. The way it goes is usually like this. You might be put in a team of 4 people. So here's player 1, that's you. Player 2, which is someone you don't know. Player 3, someone you don't know. Player 4, someone else you don't know. And you're given 10 coins. These boxes represent 10 coins, and that then just indicates some form of proportion. So say you're given the option of choosing a proportion of the money you've got to put into a shared stock in the middle, and this stock is communal. And any money you put in there gets multiplied times 2 and then is delivered back to the individuals. And I actually calculated some numbers, even though they're not even that hard to come up with. So, oh, sorry about that. So let's say that you're feeling particularly generous today and you donate half of your money to go to that shared stock. That means that 5 coins here you keep yourself, 5 go into there. Number 2 is a bit stingier and only donates 2 to the communal cause. Player 3 is also pretty stingy, and player 4 is very generous and donates 8 coins. So let's just put these example numbers in, and just to make the point even clearer, this is what you keep, blue is what each person keeps, yellow is what they donate. So you have got 10, 18 coins going in, 36 divided by 4, 9 coins each. So, you know, this person's invested 8 coins, but they get 9 back, so they've got +1 than if they just kept all of the amount themselves. You're getting 4 coins more than you invested. In this case, because everyone's donated quite a lot to this shared cause, everyone gets more back. Obviously, if everyone donated the entire amount they had, they would get twice as much back. However, you can see how this is open to cheating. You could get some people who might think, well, you know, how about everyone else donates, but I don't give anything, and I get everything, and I get to keep the whole investment everyone else makes without giving anything myself, and I get an even higher benefit. I'm going to return to here because I don't think I need to illustrate that. So you can see how someone could easily cheat the system. However, what research has found is that if you actually give players the ability to penalise other players, so for instance, if someone has chosen to not donate anything, let's say you're the stingy person, and you're like, nope, not donating to the cause, then player 2 could penalise you, and next time you play this game, they're going to take off 2 coins spitefully. It's the 2 coins aren't going to go anywhere, but you're just not going to get them. And that's actually a very quick incentive, or a very quick barrier, to make sure that everyone in the game cooperates. So it does work. And of course, we observe enforcement in animals as well. It's not just humans. So a good example, and I quite like this one because it's an example of cooperation between 2 different species. Oh, wait a sec. You're not seeing the PowerPoint, are you? How clever of me. There we are. So cleaner fish, wrasse, and their clients. So cleaner fish are small little fish. They go around eating the ectoparasites, the parasites that live on top of other fish. They eat them up, they perform a service to their clients. The clients love it. This is a pufferfish, I think. They love it because, you know, they're not being parasitized anymore. They're less likely to get diseased. It's also good for their hygiene. And the cleaner fish also get some food. However, if you're a cleaner fish, you might be quite clever and think, well, you know, what if I get a nibble out of the fish I'm eating the parasites off as well? Because, you know, the mucus layers on the fish and chunk of flesh here and there, it's going to give you a bit more energy in the long term, and it's probably a little bit more food than an ectoparasite. But obviously, if they go ahead and do that, then the fish that are taking part in this won't want to cooperate with them anymore, and they actually have different ways of enforcing this. So the first one is that the fish simply might switch clients. They will go to a different cleaner fish to clean them up. They might chase them away as well, and that's quite a public signal that the cleaner fish has behaved incorrectly. And that also means that other fish around will be able to see that that cleaner fish, or that wrasse, has actually been harassing the other fish, and they won't want to allow those cleaner fish to remove the ectoparasites because they fear they're also going to get chunks of flesh bitten out of them. So it's in the interest of the cleaner fish to actually not eat their clients and build up a good reputation, let's say. Anyway, direct fitness benefits, pretty straightforward, but what if what you're doing is entirely altruistic, at least from the outside? That's when indirect fitness benefits come in. And I think the best way of explaining indirect fitness benefits is through inclusive fitness. Now, I've actually made a video on this topic, so hopefully it might be something you've seen before, but I am going to play it here anyway. This is probably, if you watched this video before and you know everything about inclusive fitness, this is the perfect moment for a loo break or a tea break or just a pause from the live stream before coming back. It lasts about 4 minutes. I know I'm going to be having a bit of water. So you have had your 4-minute warning. It is starting. 3, 2, 1. Hope the audio is good.
I'm sure you've all heard the sad news of the gorilla Harambe, who was shot dead after a child fell into his enclosure. Now, I'm not here to discuss the details because I don't think it's appropriate to do so, but the incident did spark a huge discussion on the internet, from which one of the and others. And I do want to address this question because I think it is one that we can answer with science. One of the most common answers I've seen people give is that individuals are looking out for the good of their own species. However, this is wrong, and it's not the way evolution works. Evolution does not operate at the level of the species. In fact, it operates at the lowest level of transmissible information, which we consider to be the gene, and that is contained within its vehicle, the individual. Evolution favours behaviour strategies and traits encoded by genes that increase the capacity to be transmitted to as many individuals as possible, and genes that don't do that get wiped out. This is how natural selection works. Genes don't achieve evolutionary success by merely increasing the individual's personal fitness, which would imply maximising the number of offspring they produce, for there is more to the story. Individuals in a population share genes with related individuals, which means that a gene may also increase its evolutionary success by indirectly favouring the reproduction and survival of other individuals who also carry that gene. This is known as inclusive fitness, but it also goes by the name of kin selection, and it reflects the combination of personal fitness as well as fitness obtained indirectly by helping other related individuals. In 1964, Bill Hamilton came up with Hamilton's rule, which reflects the conditions under which altruistic behaviour is performed. That is, when will an animal help another individual? R stands for relatedness, B for benefits, and C for costs. It is honestly a very simple economics equation. If the benefits outweigh the costs, altruistic behaviour will be performed. Relatedness reflects the proportion of genes shared as compared to the population average. For instance, my relatedness to each of my parents is 0.5 because I received half of my genetic material from each parent. I also share 0.5 to any siblings, 0.25 to half-siblings, grandparents and grandchildren, 0.125 to cousins. You get the picture. When Haldane was asked if he would lay down his life for his brothers, his response was, no, but I would for 2 brothers or for 8 cousins. A statement which I see fitting for a diploid organism seeking to maximise their inclusive fitness. However, Hamilton's rule also applies in more extravagant modes of inheritance. For instance, the hymenopterans, which are the ants, the bees, the wasps, are haplodiploid, which means that unfertilised eggs develop into males, and fertilised eggs, which contain twice the amount of genetic information, develop into females. This leads to interesting relatedness values between relatives, and explains the conflict and strange behaviour observed in some haplodiploid societies. For instance, the relatedness between workers is greater than between a worker and their own offspring, and much greater than between a worker and their nieces and nephews. This has led to both worker sterility, whereby workers opt out of reproducing in favour of raising more of the queen's eggs, and also to worker policing, where workers murder the offspring of other workers. The other thing to remember about evolution is that behaviours don't have to have any specific intent or insight behind them. It is very easy for us to wrongly anthropomorphise the behaviours of other organisms. No conscious intent or insight is necessary for altruistic behaviours to evolve. Now, I find this to be one of the most fascinating topics in biology, and not one that I can cover properly in this video, so you can certainly expect a video on this in the future. This is a basic introduction to the fascinating field of inclusive fitness. Now, I will agree with anyone who rightfully argues that the actions and decisions of humans are based on a lot more than a mere calculation of relatedness, as of course our priorities are dictated by many other influencing factors. But inclusive fitness nonetheless does lend a sound evolutionary explanation to both the common expression blood is thicker than water, as well as the original question that we were discussing today. Thank you so much for watching me. As always, I have a bit more information on the blog post at drawcuriosity.com, and I will see you in the next one. Bye.
Right, I think that's quite enough of that. That video is almost a year old, but the information in it is still pretty sound. I hope the key messages are basically selection occurs at the lowest level of transmissible information. Traditionally, we consider that to be the gene. Like I say, some people think the gene is a bit outdated. Technically, you could splice genes up, but you know what I mean. And essentially, that means that in order to increase your fitness, it's not just your direct fitness from the offspring that you have, but if you help relatives that share your genes as well, then you can increase your own fitness indirectly that way. And when you look at lots of examples of cooperation, it's usually not indiscriminate help unless it's, you know, a byproduct or enforced cooperation. Generally, it's a case where they're helping relatives. And to me, this begs the next question. Kin discrimination. How do you know your relatives are indeed your relatives? And this is actually a question I have for you. How would you as an organism know whether another individual is actually your relative or not? How would you know you're related to them? And how would you know how much you're related to them? So whilst you're thinking about that, I would love to see what people come up with in the comments, because the truth is there are actually quite a lot of ways in which individuals are able to recognise their relatives. And I'm going to tell you one example, which are the long-tailed tits. So there's this pretty cool research that found that long-tailed tits, every year they try and breed, they try to nest, they lay some eggs. Sometimes nesting can fail because predators happen, eggs don't hatch, things don't go well. And then there tend to be two groups of long-tailed tits. Some of them will actually try again, they will try and nest again, say a month or two late, and others will actually help other pairs rear their own offspring. And obviously that's very helpful for the mothers who are rearing the chicks, because it means they've got extra support, the chicks are more likely to be fed well, and the mortality rates for those chicks are a lot lower. And when they looked at the relatedness between them, they found that generally they always helped relatives, and when they didn't, they suspected it was because of some kind of recognition problem. But generally they're trying to help their relatives because that's their way of increasing their indirect fitness. It's like, well, if I can't breed this year, then I'm going to help my sister, my brother rear their own chicks, and I'll try again next year. And they did a bit more research into this, and the way they discovered that they're able to detect whether, sorry, that's what I should have thought there. The way they discovered how they're able to identify whether one is a relative or not is through their chirr or their chirrup. So this is what a long-tailed tit sounds like. They have a very characteristic song, and it's actually variable across different groups of individuals, and where you're reared makes it is what determines how you actually create your own chirr and the ones that you recognise around you. Obviously you're likely to be reared amongst those who are your brothers and sisters, so you can safely infer that someone that chirps or sounds like you is probably related to you. So that's how they do it. And they wanted to make sure it was an environmental marker, that is, that it was this chirr sound. and whether the chirp was environmentally mediated. So do they learn to chirp that way because everyone around them is speaking or chirping the same way? Or is there something genetic about the way you make these sounds? And so the researchers actually switched around a few eggs. They put a few unrelated eggs amongst a load of brothers, and they found that when that unrelated chick was reared and grew up, it actually chirped like its foster brothers and sisters. And if they failed to breed, they would actually help those that they were reared up with. So they couldn't actually tell that they were genetically related to the other birds around them, but because usually you're reared with brothers and sisters, then they just assumed, because of the environmental characteristics where they grew up, that that is probably how they can identify their kin. There was more to this. I was going to say that I did not think that these long-tailed tits looked particularly cooperative, but they are actually pretty helpful. Another example of a bird that is a cooperative breeder on occasions is the superb fairy wren, which is an excellent name for a bird. This is the male, very bright and colourful, and this is the female, a little bit more low-key. And basically they do the same thing as the long-tailed tits, but when you look at the chick mass in the end, actually having this cooperative breeding doesn't actually lead to more offspring or a lower mortality. The chick mass in fact is the same, so the chicks, whether they've been helped or not, are just as heavy by the end of their rearing period. So this is a case where cooperation doesn't seem that obvious. You know, why are they helping out if actually the cooperative breeder isn't making any tangible difference? And actually, they do make a difference, which researchers decided to look into highly specific things, and what they found is that mothers who are helped to rear their chicks actually lay smaller eggs. So instead of the mother investing an additional few milligrams or grams laying an egg, they actually lay them between, I think, 5 and 10% lighter, because they know that with the extra help they're receiving, they're going to be able to rear the smaller chicks to have more food and eventually reach their target weight at the end. And as we said earlier, the amount of energy you expend is quite important, even with things such as development. Apparently small things can make huge changes later on in life. And in the case of the females, being able to lay a smaller egg means that she's invested less energy into rearing these chicks, and she's around 10% more likely to be able to breed again next year. And that is a cumulative and tangible difference. So these cooperative breeders are actually increasing their indirect fitness over a longer period of time, because the pairs they're helping are able to rear more chicks in the long term, because the help is easing the load off. And I guess if you think about it, I'm sure some people watching will have kids and some people won't. And, you know, it's probably better to get help and have other people help minding your kids so you have more time to do other things. And to be honest, I would say that humans are pretty good at cooperative breeding and helping each other out. And I should probably not make any more comments on kids because I don't have them. So yes, back to the topic of kin discrimination. Environmental cues are quite obvious. The people you grew up around probably a sign that you're related to them. Localization is quite important too. I'm not going to go into detail there, but there are actually quite a lot of populations of, for instance, insects, which are called viscous populations. There's not very much dispersal, so you basically are born, reproduce and die in pretty much the same place, and that means that everyone around you is highly likely to be related, and because of that it also means you're more likely to help the people around you because of that higher chance of them being related. However, I'm sure and I hope some people are also wondering, Inés, aren't there any more obvious genetic ways? Can't you just do genetic testing to see if someone's related and then you know whether to help them or not? And there are a few genetic cues. One of my favourite ones come from eusocial insects. So ants have cuticular hydrocarbons, which are basically hydrocarbons that are expressed on the surface of their exoskeleton, which they can detect. And basically, depending on your profile, they're highly variable. If your profile matches the one of the colony, they know you belong to the colony and they're going to help you. If you come from another colony, they're going to destroy you. Or maybe not, it depends on the ant. So there are forms of genetic cues, and I don't know how many people watching will have heard of greenbeards. Probably if you've studied evolutionary biology, or you've read, or if you've read The Selfish Gene by Richard Dawkins, I'm sure you'll come across that term. So greenbeards, they're not really a real thing. It's more of a theoretical experiment, a thought experiment. The concept itself actually comes from William Hamilton, or Bill Hamilton, who was the guy who came up with the inclusive fitness from that video you just watched. But Richard Dawkins was the guy who gave it that name. So a greenbeard, there you go, literal greenbeard. Basically, it's a gene or a linked set of genes on a chromosome that are tightly linked and probably will be transmitted as a unit that has 3 traits. First of all, they are perceptible and they are obvious, such as a green beard. Secondly, the individuals with a green beard can identify other individuals who have green beards. And thirdly, they will have preferential treatment to those with green beards, so you're more likely to help someone who's got that specific gene, because then you're more likely to pass that gene on to the next generation. Now, it's a thought experiment because generally things aren't focused around one gene. Generally, individuals act over what is the population average of the genes, but also compared to the population average. I'm explaining this terribly. I'm trying to think of the best way to explain this. In essence, what I'm trying to say is that when you're helping an individual, you're not doing it because of one specific gene, you're doing it because of the average sets of genes over them. But it's a good thought experiment to think about how you would actually identify what proportion of genes over the population average of shared alleles another individual has. But there's a big issue with greenbeards, and is that you are susceptible to cheats, because you could have someone who also grows a green beard, but isn't a true green beard person, and therefore they may be less likely to help or give back, so they would benefit from the help from that cooperation, but they wouldn't actually be returning to the other population of green beards. So again, you have a cheat, you have someone who's going to get more benefit from this system, and they're not going to have to give back, so probably cheats would spread. And that's why it's somewhat of a theoretical experiment. It's very hot in this room. Dum-da-dum. And the next question, the final, almost the final one, because it links to spite, is do you actually find green beards in nature? So like I said, this is a thought experiment, and as you can see, there are quite a few flaws with the way we think about green beards. So are there actually any animals that have them? I was aware of one example, and then I consulted the interwebs to see if there are any more. And they are rare, but there are a few. So the first one is Dictyostelium discoideum, which is the slime mold. Slime molds are basically a model organism for this. Usually they're unicellular, but when the going gets tough for them, they actually start to aggregate and they form a pseudo multicellular pseudoplasmodium, it's called. So they form this aggregate slime mold, and that's also what they do when they're going to sexually reproduce and release spores. So you get lots of unicellular organisms aggregating together. They form this long fruiting body with a saurocarp at the top where the spores are that will be released. This is an example of cooperation, because you actually have quite a few individuals here who aren't going to be able to reproduce, whereas those there are. So they're actually being quite altruistic in doing this. And it is known that Dictyostelium have certain genes, of which name I have specifically forgotten right now, but they will actually preferentially aggregate with those same genes and actually neglect or not aggregate with those that don't, meaning that those that carry that gene are more likely to be passed on to the next generation, especially when it comes to forming that fruiting body. Okay, another example I found, and I feel this would not be me talking about science if I didn't raise a bit of skepticism somewhere. I personally don't think this is a green beard, and hopefully, as I'm explaining it, you'll also question whether you think it's a green beard or not. I'm not saying it's not a green beard, I just don't think there's sufficient evidence to say it is. So the wood mouse has some excellent catchy sperm. I challenge you to come up with family-friendly but funny innuendo for this. So the wood mouse has some very special sperm, which has these hooks inside. And the hooks aren't deployed when they're inside their own sperm ducts, but when they're put into the reproductive tract or vagina of a female wood mouse. They deploy the hooks, and these hooks actually make the sperm aggregate with each other. And apparently the speed at which the sperm can traverse the reproductive tract is about 10% faster than without. Now, bearing in mind that a female wood mouse will probably mate with multiple males, it's in the male's interest in post-mating sexual selection to have the fastest sperm, because they're going to reach the ova first, and therefore they're going to fertilise them, and therefore more pups in the wood mouse's following litter will be fathered by that mouse. Now, why do I think this is not a green beard gene? I'm not really sure why it's even listed as one, because I would say it seems to me like all this sperm would aggregate with itself. It obviously preferentially avoids the sperm from other males, but I would have expected a little bit more selection within it if you go back to the 3 characteristics. And I don't think there's enough evidence to show, you know, if you had a sperm that had differently shaped hooks, because they do have variation in their hook shape, it doesn't seem clear to me what the mechanism is to prevent it from aggregating or not aggregating with other sperm types, and if it would discriminate between its own sperm types if it were heterozygous at that point. So that's why I'm not entirely sure it's a green beard, and the paper itself says it's not sure if it's a green beard, it's a possibility. But I did think it was a cool example, and it meant I get to talk about sexual selection, so that's why it's in there. I would love to hear your thoughts on it. Another example, flocculating yeast. I have to say, flocculation is one of the best biology words in my opinion. So, lump of text, right. Yeast, or Saccharomyces cerevisiae, great Latin pronunciation right there, Inés. So, yeast in general do not aggregate together, but there are certain genes in yeast that can make them flocculate or start flocculation. It's a form of self-adherence or aggregation, and it's actually quite beneficial to the yeast when things are tough, because it means they can protect each other from external stresses, and overall it helps the yeast. And I think it also, similar to Dictyostelium or the slime mold, I think it's also somewhat related to sexual reproduction, but don't quote me on that because I'm not an expert in yeast. Anyway, the gene that makes flocculation happen is FLO1 or FLO1, and they will preferentially adhere to each other, and in fact they will directly not aggregate with a yeast cell that does not express this gene. So basically they have 2 genes that are somehow perceptible, they recognise them, and they give preferential treatment to each other. Therefore, we can say it's a true green beard gene. And the other very interesting thing about FLO1 is that it's also highly variable, which is a sign that there's quite a bit of selective pressure on it, it's evolving fast, and therefore it's an interesting social trait for these microorganisms. And finally, I wanted to talk about spiteful ants. So you might remember from the start we were talking about cooperation, which reasonably hard to explain, but hopefully you understand now why animals cooperate. But spite still seems like somewhat of a mystery. And I'm going to call back on our friend Paint to talk about this one. Right. So generally, we're talking about an actor. So you've got your focal individual, which is you, and they're performing a social behaviour on another actor. And in the case of spite, the focal individual, you, is doing something negative to actually hurt someone else. And this is generally quite confusing because there's clearly no benefit. Why would this evolve? Why would this be maintained? Why would this happen? And the truth is, you've got to consider that there might be a secondary recipient, 3, over here, who probably shares your genes through indirect fitness benefits. And by you harming this individual that you might not be related to, you are also helping this individual. And that is what we think is happening with these spiteful ants. So spiteful ants, first of all, thank you very much to Alex Wild, who takes the most excellent ant photos, and I was overjoyed that he said I could use them in this presentation. This is Solenopsis invicta. It is the red fire ant, I think the imported version, and you've got your queen ant, and you've got your worker ants. And in essence, what's very special about these ants is they can form polygyne colonies. Polygyne colonies, oh sorry, I just talked about a beautiful ant photo that I didn't show you. There we go, here is the ant photo. This is the queen, this is the worker. There we go, queen, worker, let's pretend that didn't happen. Awesome photo by Alex Wilde, thank you so much. I really love his ant photos, he's got some very excellent ones. Not sponsored or anything, I just genuinely am a huge fan of his work and slightly overjoyed that I get to feature it here with his permission. Yeah, so going back to what I was saying, they can form polygyne colonies. That means that they can have multiple queens founding a single colony. What's great about that is you have way more workers, you have a larger workforce, and actually many invasive ants tend to be polygyne, as in they have multiple queens. Now, Solenopsis invicta have a special gene, which I'm not entirely what it does apart from being a spiteful greenbeard gene. It's called GP9, and it has two alleles. There is a dominant version, which is a capital B, and a recessive one, which is a little b. And then queens and workers can either be homozygous for the large dominant B or heterozygous big B, small b. And as far as I can tell, there aren't really many individuals that have two little b's, and apparently it's because this is a lethal version, although there is the occasional individual that has two little b alleles. So I'm not quite sure what's going on there, nor why it is lethal. But anyway, it is thought that this gene is or is linked to a greenbeard gene, and in essence, if we go back to this colony situation, when you have a queen that is homozygous, if they were founding a colony in the wild, they would only form a monogyne colony, which means there's a single queen, there's no space for the queens, no space for the workers, there's a sole foundress, that queen, and that's it. And in essence, when one of these queens grows up in a polygyne colony, when she's getting ready to lay eggs, the workers that are heterozygous, that is, they have the big B and the little b, they are able to clearly smell that she is ready to lay eggs and that she is homozygous. There must be something about that that is linked to their cuticular hydrocarbon profile that we talked about earlier. And they know that maybe she has intentions of setting up a monogyne colony, or who knows. We don't actually know, because it triggers aggression in these workers and they actually dismember the queen, which is obviously quite spiteful behaviour because it's quite costly to dismember an ant, and also the queen ant doesn't get to lay eggs. But that is one of the best examples of spite we've got in the animal kingdom, and if you think about it, it is indirectly favouring all of those that are heterozygous for the big B, little b. So there's that. Yes, so this is a little reminder of where we are in our cooperation. So we've done 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 and 8. And now, just to be confusing, we're going back to direct benefits into reciprocity, which is actually a type of conditional enforcement. So I decided to come to this last. First of all, I think it's a little bit trickier. I think it's a good one to end on. And you could say, if you wanted to apply this to humans, because I personally, I'll admit, when I study biology, I like to keep humans out of it, but lots of people are interested how these things apply to humans and to human nature and human behaviour. And I would say that reciprocity is probably how we can explain most cooperation in humans, obviously in direct benefits as well, and should be said that this is a multifactorial thing. There's a lot of things that contribute to cooperation, so you could expect a crossover between them. So reciprocity, basically, if you scratch my back, I will scratch yours back as well. Or, in actual science lingo, tit for tat. Okay, how many people in the chat have heard of Axelrod's experiment? Personally, I think this was one of the coolest things that happened in biology in the 1970s. If you remember earlier, we kind of dabbled a little bit with game theory when we did the public goods game. And if you were to simplify that down, you could say you could either cooperate or you could defect. Those could be the two binary actions that someone might carry out in an interaction between two organisms. People also speak about pigeon and dove. So, for instance, say two individuals come to a focal piece of food there. If you're a pigeon, you might, you would never attack. You might just cooperate and let the other individual take the food. Or you could be a hawk, which automatically attacks. If it's attacking a pigeon, then the pigeon will flee and run away, and the hawk gets the food. So the hawk gets the better deal. Maybe two pigeons would cooperate together, or maybe they'd never get to agreement. That's up to you to decide how it goes. And obviously, if two hawks encounter each other, then they fight each other to the death. One of them is going to incur the cost of fighting, one of them is probably going to die, and one of them is going to get the food. So there are lots of different outcomes to this, and tit for tat reduces this to the two: will you cooperate with the other individual, or fly away or avoid conflict, or will you defect? Will you be selfish and attack the other option? And Axelrod did this experiment. It was an early computer science experiment where he came up with lots of different strategies, and he also invited people to send in their own strategies to see which would be the best one in this scenario. And he would code them for each individual. He did a huge matrix with all the possible behaviours they could do and battled them off against each other. And tit for tat, which is basically, first of all, you are cooperative. So if you're the person initiating the action, you will cooperate. And then what you will do is you will just mirror what the other person does to you back. So if someone defects, then you defect right back at them. If the other person cooperates, then you're going to reciprocate that and you're going to cooperate back. And in essence, the highest fitness counts on average, and in most cases, happens for tit for tat. It's not the perfect strategy. It is possible for other strategies to actually do better than it, but it is what we generally observe in nature as well. So there you go, tit for tat, Axelrod. Back to the vampire bats. So, if you remember from earlier, and let me check my notes to make sure that I do not forget anything, because there was quite a lot of interesting stuff about this. Yes. Right, so the vampire bat work is by Gerald Wilkinson and Gerald Carter. I believe it was quite a significant Nature paper. What they found, though, was quite interesting. Most bats actually help individuals that have helped them before. So they would actually be a very good case of reciprocity. You have to bear in mind that all of these bats, they grow up together, they live in the same cave, they're in a very tight-knit society. So they clearly know who all the individuals are. They probably have their closer friends or the ones they know better. So if you've been helped in the past before by one of the bats, you're more likely to help them back in the future. And that's how you maintain reciprocity. You're building up this reputation of, okay, if I'm sick one day, then I know you've got my back, but for now, I'm doing well, so I'm going to help you. So that's what's happening with the vampire bats. But I have a question, which is it really true reciprocity? Because the thing is, there are quite a few things about this which I think reciprocity might be quite a nice story, but I'm not entirely convinced it truly is, and I will leave that for you to decide in the end. Sorry, my voice is going, so I need to just drink a little bit of tea. Right, yes, so we were talking about bats following a tit-for-tat algorithm. Okay, so you would expect them to be following a tit-for-tat algorithm. That's when you would say it is reciprocity. But is it true reciprocity by the pedantic biologist's reciprocity definitions? Well, first of all, for true reciprocity to happen, the individuals have to be able to cooperate over a long period of time, such that interactions back and forth, in order for proper tit-for-tat to occur, that has to be the case. Obviously, the bats grow up together, they also rear their young for ages, they basically live and probably die in the same cave. So it's probably safe to say that yes, there's plenty of time for these interactions to happen. I'm sure bats get sick enough on average, or maybe fail to get a proper blood meal on some occasion, that they have plenty of occasions to help each other out. So far, Probably yes. Then of course the benefit of receiving the help must outweigh the cost of giving it. Now I did mention earlier that of course it is quite an altruistic thing to do for a bat to help another individual, but ultimately if you're pretty well fed, giving a little bit of food, you're still not going to starve that night, whereas for the other bat it's the difference between life or death. The stakes are a lot higher for that starving bat. So yes, you could probably say that the benefit of receiving aid could outweigh the cost of donating it. Then, the amount that they help others must also be based on how much they've helped them, so it's not indiscriminate. It has to be a case where if someone's helped you a lot, then you're a lot more likely to help them. And likewise, if you've helped someone before and then when you've needed help they've been like, I'm going to keep all this blood to myself, then you're probably not going to help them again, because, fool me once, shame on you, fool me twice, shame on me. Is that the saying? But in order to say whether it's true reciprocity, you also have to be able to say that it's cooperation that can't be explained by a simpler mechanism. And here is another occasion where I would really like to challenge you, and it is, can you come up with a simpler mechanism that these bats may be cooperating? So whilst you're thinking, I will say I can think of two, and I have also read about these two. The first one is when you read the paper, most of the individuals who are helping other individuals, they're actually related, they're relatives. And of course that kind of makes you think that it could be indirect fitness, because if you grow up together with your brothers and your sisters, you're going to help those that share your genes, because they're more likely to also increase your inclusive fitness by increasing your indirect fitness. So given that I think of all the bats they looked at, only 5 were friends or close roost mates or unrelated, it might just be that whatever they used to recognise related individuals just failed on those occasions, and it's just a case of an error as opposed to it actually being the case. And then the other one is that it could actually be a different type of enforced cooperation through direct benefit. So reciprocity is one, but when these bats are asking for food, they get into the cave and they start begging. They start harassing other bats until they get fed. That obviously means that some bats aren't going to be able to sleep or rest until those bats are fed, and that in itself might mean that the other bats incur a higher cost because they're being kept up or they're not getting the rest they need by these louder bats. So actually it might pay off for them to just feed those bats to shut them up. So basically what we're saying is it might not be reciprocity if any of these two other cases are true. It could actually just be enforced cooperation. It could be indirect benefits. To be honest, I think both are quite likely, and that reciprocity in this instance might be a little far-fetched. But nonetheless, I think the vampire bats do illustrate an important point, which is sharing is caring, not caring is sharing. And sharing is caring on live streams as well. I love that. I always get this the wrong way around, unless it is the right way around, who knows. Either way, this is officially, I believe, the end of the cooperation live stream, quite an abrupt ending. Hopefully I've been able to explain what cooperation is from a biological perspective, what it means. It's a type of social behaviour that has evolved at least partially, and it involves helping another individual. Sometimes you're able to get good things from it, sometimes it's just indirect benefits. And there are lots of different ways that this can happen. This is what Stuart West came to as a conclusion. And yeah, that is everything. I feel that is the end of the slideshow. So let's switch back to just camera. I'm happy, so I've definitely gone over. So there's meant to be a Q&A over on the Evolutions seminar series channel, and I will be hopping over there very shortly. But I'm happy to try and take a few quick questions now, just to make sure that the people who will be asking me questions have a chance to get to the end of the live stream. I know there's a bit of a delay. Some people might have started late, even though I kind of doubt that because of all the technical difficulties. So if you have any questions, now is the time. and I will stick around for a few minutes and then I'll hop over there if you want to watch more questions. And also this means I actually finally get to read the comments. Yes, EvoS said you can watch the Q&A over on our channel. I have actually linked that down below. And actually I'm going to start making sure I can set up to transfer over there. Yisrael asked, can cooperation of bats be a combination of the 3 different theories? Personally, I think that is entirely possible because I don't think the different forms of cooperation are mutually exclusive. I actually think in some ways it's perhaps overly segmented, but it can be good at describing the way we see these behaviours, but they are ultimately artificial categories we've formed. Returning to the bit at the start where I was saying there's a difference between origin and maintenance of cooperation, it is highly likely that cooperation generally evolves through kin selection and indirect fitness benefits, and then later on can lead to more direct fitness benefits. Obviously not the case for everything, but that is how I believe cooperation to be most likely to originate, and then these other different methods can actually maintain it or make sure that cooperation is enforced or is still a thing over time. Cool, thank you very much everyone. I'm glad you've enjoyed it. And yeah, would you put the relationship that we form with our pets under the cooperation banner? Yes, I would actually. So one video I wanted to make talk about one day. So dogs and humans have to a degree co-evolved together, in the sense that humans have a very crap sense of smell, and dogs, for instance, can't see quite so well, so they've actually grown different senses over time. So it's almost like we rely on the dogs to find the food and to hunt, whereas we use our eyesight and, I don't know, our organisational capabilities. And you could say together as a team we work well. I feel this is a video I will need to research more, because I do kind of feel like I'm spewing pseudoscience-y bullcrap explaining it like this, but I have come across some articles that talk about it as potentially an example of co-evolution and probably to a degree of cooperation. Obviously when you have a domestic animal, they also rely on you to feed them and look after them, and to a degree a lot of their well-being is left in your hands. And I guess you could say that humans also get positive things out of having pets, whether it be emotional well-being or perhaps a service guide dog that helps them out. So I'd definitely say it's an example of cooperation, definitely in the form of direct benefits, most certainly. You might see it as a byproduct, you might see it as enforced. If your dog doesn't behave, maybe you're nasty back to it, who knows. Dogs and humans, what do you put the relationship? Right, I think I'm going to call it a day here, because I'm also getting very, very warm. I have closed all the windows in this flat so that you don't get the sound of cars driving by, and it is slowly becoming a greenhouse in here. So I'm going to close it here, but I'm going to be over on the EvoS Q&A very shortly. So if you want to hop on over there and watch thoughtful questions there with a very tired Inés, then feel free to hop on over. And if not, then I hope you have a very lovely end of your day and that you enjoyed this live stream very much. Thank you so much for watching me, and I will see you in the next one.